On the evening of November 5, 1997, a Virgin Atlantic Airbus A340 prepared for a routine transatlantic journey from Los Angeles International Airport to London Heathrow. But what began as an ordinary red-eye flight would evolve into a gripping tale of quick thinking, technical mystery, and extraordinary airmanship. The calm before the crisis. It was just after 7 o'clock p.m. when the crew reported for duty. The Airbus A340-300, a relatively new 4-year-old aircraft known for its strong safety record, was assigned to operate Flight 224. The 10.5-hour overnight flight would cruise over the North American continent and the Atlantic Ocean before landing in the UK the following afternoon. Captain Tim Barnby, 40 years old, occupied the left seat in the cockpit. With over 14,000 flight hours under his belt, including nearly 3,000 on the A340, Barnby was a seasoned aviator. Joining him was 32-year-old First Officer Andrew Morley. Though he was still building time on the A340 with just over 300 hours, Morley brought extensive experience from the A320 and A310. Relief pilot Craig Mayton, 28, also supported the crew. While Mayton too was relatively new to the aircraft, he had over 4,500 total flight hours, providing a solid backup during the long journey. As passengers boarded and luggage was stowed, 73 metric tons of fuel were pumped into the tanks. The aircraft, loaded and prepped, pushed back from the gate just before 9 p.m., running slightly behind schedule. An invisible malfunction. The takeoff from runway 24L was uneventful. The A340 climbed out over the glittering lights of Los Angeles before turning northeast, and soon the autopilot was engaged. All seemed routine, except it wasn't. As the landing gear retracted, something critical happened, completely unnoticed in the cockpit. A torque pin from the left main landing gear came loose and fell from the aircraft, eventually landing near the airport's perimeter. Though the pilots noticed a slight delay in gear retraction, they had no way of knowing that a small but vital component was now lying hundreds of feet below. Blissfully unaware, the crew settled into cruise as the aircraft began its journey across the continent. An ominous indication. Several hours into the flight, while conducting routine system checks, the pilots observed an unusual alert. A brake temperature sensor on the inner rear wheel of the left main gear displayed 2 dashes, indicating a loss of signal. In a jet filled with complex electronics, a single sensor fault wasn't especially concerning. The crew logged it and continued flying, not realizing it was a symptom of a much larger problem. Meanwhile, passengers enjoyed meal service, chatted quietly, or attempted to sleep. By the time the aircraft reached the Atlantic, the first hints of daylight were emerging. It was the last moment of calm. Approach and alarm. Nearly 10 hours after departure, Flight 024 began its descent toward Heathrow. Weather conditions were favorable, good visibility, light clouds, and moderate winds from the south. Morley, now back at the controls after a rest, prepared the aircraft for a final approach to runway 27R. With flaps extended and speed stabilized, the last step was to lower the landing gear. That's when the cockpit lit up with warnings. The right main gear and the nose gear deployed normally, but the left main landing gear failed to show any signs of movement. The aircraft's computer flagged a gear unsafe alert. The crew knew immediately they could not land like this. A change of plan. Standard procedure dictates that gear might take a few seconds longer to deploy, so the crew continued their descent, hoping it would resolve. But as they neared 1,400 feet, it was clear that the gear was not coming down. The aircraft climbed away from the runway, executing a missed approach. In a worst-case scenario, landing with one main gear missing could result in catastrophic damage, potentially causing the aircraft to veer off the runway, tip over, or even impact terminal buildings. Troubleshooting in the skies. After climbing to 8,000 feet and holding over Bovingdon, the crew attempted every method they had trained for. First, they tried the gravity gear extension, designed to allow the gear to fall into place without hydraulic assistance. Still, the left gear didn't budge. They reset circuit breakers, ran alternate extension procedures, and consulted the Airbus manuals, all to no avail. Fortunately, they weren't alone. Virgin Atlantic's operations center at Heathrow was within radio range. Experts from engineering and the A340 fleet management team joined the effort. Despite extensive efforts and ideas, including the classic reset and retry method, nothing worked. The reality began to sink in. They might have to land without the left gear deployed. Where to land? Heathrow's operations team raised another concern. If the aircraft crash landed and became stuck on the runway, it could paralyze the airport's operations. They suggested diverting to Manston, a former military base in Kent with a long, wide runway and emergency services on standby. But time and fuel were running out. With only about 1 hour of fuel remaining, diverting risked running out of options mid-air. Captain Barnby decided to stay at Heathrow, reasoning that it was better equipped and closer. Low pass and visual confirmation. Still unsure if the gear was truly stuck or merely giving a false reading, the captain requested an unusual maneuver, a low flyby of Heathrow's control tower. Air traffic control approved, and the massive jet swept in at just 300 feet above the ground. An engineer stationed in the tower confirmed the pilot's worst fear. The left main gear was hanging partially extended, stuck in the bay. It was neither fully deployed nor locked. Thinking outside the checklist. With conventional procedures exhausted, Virgin Atlantic's fleet manager suggested an unconventional idea: bump the gear down by landing on the right side and jarring the left gear free. Risky? Absolutely. If it didn't work, the plane could tip and skid off the runway uncontrollably. While considering this, the low fuel warning illuminated. Options were narrowing fast. Then came another creative suggestion. Try pulling G-forces in flight. The captain banked the aircraft into a steep 50-degree turn, causing the passengers to feel 1.5 times their body weight as a desperate attempt to shake the gear loose. A calculated emergency landing. With no other choice, the crew declared a mayday. After evaluating wind conditions and potential hazards, the captain chose to land on runway 27L. Positioning the aircraft on the right side of the runway so that any loss of control would carry them away from terminals. A careful plan was devised. They would touch down on the right main gear, with the captain holding the left wing aloft as long as possible. Immediately after touchdown, the relief pilot would shut down the two outer engines to reduce the risk of fire. The inboard engines would remain running for hydraulic control. As the plane slowed, they would sequentially shut down the remaining engines to maintain control as long as they could. A moment of truth. The captain lined up with the runway. At just 200 feet, the brace command echoed through the cabin. Touchdown. The right main gear kissed the runway. The relief pilot shut down engines 1 and 4. The captain held the left wing up, but perhaps a bit too high. Engine 4 scraped the runway, showering sparks behind. Eventually, the left wing dropped, and engine 1 ground along the tarmac. The crew shut it down, followed by engine 3. The aircraft swerved left. The captain pushed hard on the right rudder. Tires burst under the pressure. Finally, the aircraft screeched to a halt. A triumph of teamwork. Within just 3 minutes of landing, all 114 passengers and crew members aboard Flight 024 had been safely evacuated, with not a single injury reported. The captain's expertly executed emergency landing was so effective that Airbus later adopted his technique into official training protocols. Investigators later discovered that a torque pin found near Los Angeles International Airport had likely endured more stress than originally anticipated during the aircraft's service life. Although missing components prevented a full reconstruction of the failure, the incident was serious enough to prompt Airbus to redesign the gear mechanism, update procedures, and strengthen pilot training for similar emergencies. What could have ended in tragedy instead became a shining example of aviation excellence, thanks to the calm, collaborative, and quick-thinking actions of Captain Tim Barnby, First Officer Andrew Morley, and Relief Pilot Craig Mayton. Their remarkable teamwork turned a critical malfunction into a historic lesson in aviation safety and professionalism. And if you found this video as jaw-dropping as we did, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more real-life aviation dramas, heroic landings, and untold cockpit stories. Got thoughts on how the crew handled it? Drop a comment below, we'd love to hear from you. And as always, fly safe, stay curious, and we'll see you in the next one.